Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the seminar today. On behalf of Stormwater Victoria, Engineers Australia and DELWP, I'd like to welcome you. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we meet, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and any elders from other communities that may be here today. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chris Beatrice, our president, who I'd like to thank heaps for being, as well as myself and Alice from EA and Hervé for organising it. But yeah, Chris has been the real driver behind getting this going from our side, certainly. And he's put in many hours to get us here. So thanks, Chris, and welcome up.
Thanks, Ralph, the immediate past president. So I'll try and be quick because no one's here to listen to me. I firstly have to thank probably Val as much as anyone. She's behind me. She's been pushing me to try and get the industry moving in this space. And we've been, at SV, we've been talking about it for a while, trying to work out when the right time is to try and put something out. Peter Coombs, one of the authors, sent me an email. I don't know, can't see him here. The urban chapter is about to be released, I'm understanding, this week. 4 parts of that should be out, and then the last couple of parts after that. So that was part of it. The second part of it was that DELWP came to us earlier this year, and Steve's going to talk in a second. And they were looking to how do we lead the industry on this. So I have to thank them, and they put some sponsorship in, which made us be able to take this event from a standard event to getting some facilitation. But thank you again. Thank you to everyone for coming. And I think I now hand over to Andrew, Engineers Australia. Okay, thank you.
Okay, from Engineers' point of view, Engineers Australia's point of view, I'm the chair of the National Committee on Water Engineering, and ARR has been organised by Engineers Australia as National Committee. ARR has been a long time coming. It's taken more than 8 years. Initially got kicked off in 2008 with a series of projects. It had up to $10 million worth of funding from Geosciences Australia, and that's from that we've been able to put it out in the public domain. It's been managed by the National Committee of Water Engineering, and it's involved a whole wide range of people. Bureau of Meteorology has done a lot of work on the IFD and the like. Geosciences Australia, CSIRO, various state agencies. A lot of academics, a lot of people put in a lot of their own time into developing ARR, so a lot of this has been done by volunteers. University of Technology Sydney, University of Western Sydney, University of New South Wales, Newcastle University, University of Adelaide, University of Melbourne, and basically most of the consulting firms have got specialist water engineering groups, including my own company, Water Technology. So, just briefly, ARR is a guideline. So it's not a standard, it's a guideline. So it's to give you a guideline as to how to approach things, because every flood is different, or many situations are different. So we can't be prescriptive, but we can give you an idea of how to go about things. Bit of history. So this is the 4th version of ARR. Started way back in 1958. I don't think I've seen a copy of the 1958 version. Most of us would be familiar with the version 3, which came out in 1987, and that had the big book of maps for the IFD, and you have to go through those, and I think we've still got them in the office from my original ones I bought back in 1987. It's a bit of an update in 1999, but it's been, so the return period for ARR is roughly 20 years, but the last one has been, it's been 30 years coming. The National Committee had been talking about it from 1990 onwards, but it wasn't. It became a very big project. So instead of being a single book, it's grown into nine books now. So some of the objectives behind the development was to introduce Australian data. Some of the rainfall statistics from the old 1987 were developed using overseas data. Also, we had another 30 years worth of data for us to update the IFD curves. The ARR is aimed at you guys, the practitioners, people who actually want to use the document rather than a reference book. The changes have been made to better represent real systems, and we've tried to introduce wherever possible scientifically based, evidence-based approaches. And these have been aimed to fit in with the and complement the broader tools that we use for other things for managing the water cycle. And where possible, we've been aiming to get a measure of the uncertainty of the methods and input. So some measure of what certainty do I have around the answers that I get out of it. So some of the applications, what we wanted to do was computerise most of the simple tasks. So get some of the hand stuff out of it. Needed to make things easy to use and wanted to be able to minimise human errors. That made it reproducible, and for us, we can easily update it. So it goes back to the data hub. We can update stuff, and that can be done very easily. So big changes from a practice point of view, which I guess you'll be hearing about a little bit more about this morning, is the introduction of ensemble and Monte Carlo approaches to better capture variability. And there's been the move away from simple burst approaches. Focus on risk-based design. We've always spoken about risk-based design for years. Well, this is being able to put a bit more of that into practice. And for many people, one aspect that has been a bit of concern for some people has been the less reliance on the rational method. That there's no real physical evidence behind the rational method. We've tried to introduce methods that are have a bit more scientific basis. And lastly, we've introduced some input on climate change effects. So the document itself it's 9 books, gone from 1 book to 9 books. This is a list of the headings of each book. I won't go through it. It's an e-publication. It's under Creative Commons, which means that no one has, we don't have ownership of it. It's out there in the public domain, but you need to use it. You need to attribute it. So if you're using ARR, which we would do normally as a matter of course. So it's got its own web page, arr.ga, so that's on the Geosciences web page there, and at the moment it's in two formats. So it's a downloadable e-publication. I downloaded it yesterday and it's over 100 megs, so it's not a small document. Or you can actually get to it at an interactive web page. Still a few bugs in it. We're still working on editing and updating bits and pieces. I had a look at the chapter I had something to do with, and most of the equations were still gobbledygook, so we need to actually get in there and fix it. So there's ongoing work, maintenance associated with that. Ultimately, we'll have a PDF version that'll be available to everyone when it's finalised. Also, as part of the ARR, before we got into the serious ARR, we had something like just over 20 specialist projects to look at a range of different things, which this covered things from blockage effects to safety in floods, human safety in floods. But 2 of the special projects that are particular interest to most of us, the 2-dimensional modelling in urban and rural floodplains, which came out in 2012, and the Monte Carlo simulation techniques that came out in 2013. Okay, it's been a long time coming, but the official training will be kicked off, I think, in the next couple of weeks in Sydney, but it's going to 4 major capital cities, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth and Melbourne. Ultimately coming here, 19th and 20th of July. I think we're taking registrations for that now. That's going to be run through Engineering Education Australia and will be run here. The course presenters are Mark Babbister, who's the chair of the technical committee, and also Managing Director of WMA Water in Sydney. Rory Nathan will be one of the presenters. So Rory's been a background in a lot of the hydrology, and Bill Weeks, who is on the technical committee and a co-editor. So you've got 3 people who know most about what's going on in ARR. Course is going to be 2 days. The first day is introduction and update, so give you an overview, what's in there, what are the changes, and what is now going to be considered as best practice. Day 2 is going to be aimed at practitioners, so it's going to be hands-on stuff, practical applications, looking at design inputs, parameter selection, how we go about ensemble and Monte Carlo simulations, and urban modelling. And lastly, putting a plug, so Engineers Australia, the National Committee runs 4 different conferences. Our main conference is the Hydrology and Water Resources Symposium. That's going to be in December this year. And the day, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On the Monday, we run a number of courses, and we'll be including a 1-day workshop on ARR Book 9, which I understand is just about finished and about to be released. So this on runoff in urban areas. look forward to seeing many of you at the courses in a few weeks' time. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. And as Chris mentioned, DELWP's been kindly, helped us get to this place and sponsored. And I'll invite up Steve Muncaster to have a quick intro as to what's driving DELWP in this space.
Thanks for the introduction there, Ralph, and both to Andrew and Chris for their words before. It is an opportunity here. The department's very happy to be part of this series. We are very much keen to promote best practice within the industry, and we see events like this as part of that. I must make apologies for my colleague, Jill Fagan. Unfortunately, she's unwell today, so you just got me instead of both Jill and I. And so I'm trying to be 2 for 1 here. So no tricky questions about the climate change stuff, because I'm not really fully across it. Why are we participating in this event? As I said before, we're really keen as the department to make best practice across the industry. We see the industry as a really key partner in delivery of some of the outcomes that the government's looking for at both the state level, and I know a number of you represent local governments here as well, imagine at a local government level as well. So it is really important for us as the department to make sure we've got really strong technical advice and we've got a really strong industry that's there understanding what the latest and emerging technologies are. 2 things I just want to touch on this morning. As I said, Jill was going to speak about the Climate Change Adaptation Plan, and I'll speak, well, she was, but I'll speak about it first. What we're looking at there is, I think in 2015, the Victorian government put forward its Climate Change Adaptation Plan. As part of that plan, there's a series of, if you like, sector plans which are being rolled out, and the water sector is one of those first plans to be rolled out. So we are leading the way. And so that sector water plan is looking at, well, how does the water sector, that includes right across from our retailers, right across to our local governments, right across to our other portfolios, in terms of how do we manage flood risk, but how do we more broadly manage water within the landscape in a changing climate going forward. So that adaptation plan, Jill's been doing some great work, and some of you may be involved in some of the forums that she's been having around the place, but we're getting very close to releasing a draft of that plan. It'll set out some very high-level principles and objectives about what the water sector as a whole is looking for in terms of its adaptation to climate change going forward. It is a particular interest of the Minister for Water and also the Minister for Climate Change as well as we move forward in this space as well. So unfortunately, I can't take too many questions on that, but I've got Jill's contact details at the end there if you want to speak to Jill about that at a later stage. On to something I'm a bit more familiar with, and that's the Victorian Floodplain Management Strategy. Over there on the left, the strategy was released in, when was it? 2 years ago now, in April 2016. The document really sets out some high-level principles and a policy framework for how we manage flood risk across the state. It is aimed at largely at that setting policies around accountabilities and how we go about interaction between the 3 levels of government principally in that respect. But supporting the state strategy is a number of, well, there's 10 of them, regional floodplain management strategies. 9 of them have been completed, there's just 1 more to go. But you've got an example there of Melbourne Water's regional floodplain management strategy. And really what that regional strategy aims to set out is, well, what are the local and regional actions that we're taking to manage flood risk? And a number of you will probably be familiar with that document. And it is really a guiding document for across the whole of the Port Phillip and Western Port region about how we manage flood risk. And the really important thing there to note, and this was across all the regional floodplain management strategies, is that there are regional documents. So they were developed in a lot of consultation between all the various players. They're not in this case, it's not a Melbourne Water document. It's a Melbourne Water document in partnership with its 38 councils, with the department, with other stakeholders, with the water retailers, with the State Emergency Service as well. So it is really truly a document that looks to align our efforts in terms of managing flood risk across this particular region. But if we drill down a little bit further into a regional strategy, what we've got on the left-hand side there are some classic sort of activities that we undertake to manage flood risk, and some of those would all be very familiar with. There's some objectives there on the right-hand side there about what are we aiming for in this space. I think the key message for a session like today is what's underpinning both the activities and the objectives. And what's underpinning that is really good quality technical analysis. It's fundamental for what we do. It's fundamental for policymakers like myself, for decision makers like the people you work for, the people I work for, the Minister for Water and the Victorian Government. It is fundamental that we've based our assessment and our management of flood risk on really good quality technical analysis. So hence why the department's very encouraging of events like this. So these objectives on the right-hand side there, you need to sort of frame them around various people and how they might look at that. So you might be, and we nearly had an event over the weekend. It didn't quite rain as much, but we saw down in Hobart. It's like significant rainfall event down in Hobart. So if you're an incident controller and you work for Vic SES, you're going to rely on really high quality technical information to make decisions about where you deploy resources, where do you mitigate events, how do you recover from that event. So it's fundamental to our friends in the emergency management sector. If you're a VCAP member and you're deciding on whether or not to allow a certain appeal to go ahead, well, really that appeal is largely based on that technical understanding of what's there and that technical assessment. So it's not just the technical people here, it's a whole range of other people. What else is important there is the ministers. Ministers going off to argue about money and councillors going off to argue for money in budgets. Should we put money towards flood mitigation works? Should we put money towards something else? That technical information that all of you guys provide to us to make those decisions and to make those sort of trade-offs, if you like, is fundamental. So again, events like today is really quite key to that. And when you're undertaking your work, and I used to be a consultant myself, so I understand when you work for clients, it's really important to understand what that client's going to use that information for and how they're going to make decisions based on that going forward. And that's a really fundamental aspect there. What I want to take out, I guess what I leave you with is a thought about, you're going to learn today about some emerging technologies when it comes, emerging approaches to how we analyse flood risk. That's all great, and as a former consultant and someone who grew up sort of being very involved in that technical analysis, I'm really quite looking forward to learning some more things today. But one of the things that we need to really be careful about and understand about is, well, how do we communicate that? And Andrew talked a bit about it before. We've got to be able to communicate that to policymakers, decision makers. We've got to be clear about what the uncertainty, and Andrew touched on that before in terms of what's happening in ARR. You've got to be clear in your communication back to policymakers. We're pretty simple people, policymakers. We're not overly technical people largely, so we do need some really simple concepts and some really simple communication. So while you learn about some more emerging technologies and some emerging advanced approaches to analysing flood risk, keep in the back of mind, well, how am I going to communicate this to my boss, to my councillors, to a VCAP member, to an SES incident controller, in my case, to the Minister for Water or my executive at DELWP. So it's really important to understand how we communicate that. But just to wrap up, it is a great opportunity, and DELWP welcomes and acknowledges the work of Stormwater Victoria and Engineers Australia in putting events like this on. We do certainly welcome these events and look forward to supporting them again in the future if there's other events along the way. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Steve. That's fantastic. And communicating this technical stuff is a key part of your role as well. So let's think about that going forward. And as Steve said, that's Jill's contact details if you want to get in touch about the climate change stuff, or with Steve about more flood things. Now, one of the other key, besides getting some extra technical knowledge on how to do this, one of the other key things about this morning's seminar will be trying to answer some of the questions about why a lot of you, I gather, are not using this at present. So we've got the help of Lindsay to take us through asking some questions of you and you providing us with some responses, and then we'll see what we do with that information. We're doing this at the start so that you don't get too knowledgeable and carried away with, oh yeah, I can do this. Right now you're probably in the room and might be thinking, why aren't I doing this, or why isn't the industry taking up as much? So we'd like to capture that information and then check in again afterwards. But over to you, Lindsay.
Hi. I'm Lindsay Brown. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Managing Director of Foundry Associates. We're a consulting company that works solely in the water industry to help communicate the great ideas and technical knowledge of people like you to the audiences that Steve was talking about before. So I couldn't have asked for a better plug. Thanks, Steve. Look, it's really important that I think everybody understands the importance of the tool that we're talking about. You guys work in this stuff every day, and it's really important to look at the impacts that Steve so beautifully laid out about the sound technical analysis that underpins all our work. The work you do is incredibly important, and it impacts on incredibly serious decisions, things that impact on people's lives and property, and massive implications for the whole of community. And I think all of our organizations are looking to improve life for community, and so the basis of that knowledge is actually really important. So one of the things we're going to do is actually have a bit of an understanding around what the current uptake is of ARR 2016. Now, the word around the traps is that 87, although it was a great year, I'm pretty sure that was when Madonna rose to fame, or maybe a few years after, is still where a lot of people are hanging out. So what we want to do is just get a bit of an understanding first about people's current understanding, use of ARR 2016. So if everybody could do that thing you're never supposed to do in seminars and bring out your phone. Has everybody got their phone? Excellent. And if you just want to go to, just open any web browser and go to that website that I've listed there, so polev.com/ARR 2016. So look, so this is a question. So which best describes your knowledge of ARR 2016? I've heard of it, but that's it. I know a little bit about it. I know a lot about it, but only some particular hydrology sections. And I know a lot about it, including other sections, so like all the sections. So most people know a bit about it. And it's interesting, so we don't really have any experts in the room yet, or not very many. And that's pretty consistent with what we were expecting. There seems to be a bit of a lack of knowledge still around ARR, so it'll be interesting to see how today can meet some of that gap for you. All right, so the next question, which of these best describes your use of ARR 2016 right now? I don't use it. I use it sometimes. I always use it. So, I use it sometimes, be like, oh, sometimes I use 16, sometimes I use 87, it depends. Don't use it at all, still rocking it old school. C, I always use it. Okay, so there you go. If you're not moved past Madonna's greatest hits yet, that's okay, you're not alone. All right, the next question is around, now you only get 2 choices here, so please only choose 2, and you can see there's a lot. Which are the 2 biggest reasons you and others might not use ARR 16? I'm going to go through these. 1, it seems too theoretical, it's not based on practical engineering. 2, the result it produces are actually not that different to ARR 87 anyway. 3, it says draft on it. 4, I actually don't know how to use it. 5, it's more work to run it than 87. Next, it's hard to actually set it up in the background. I'm going to have to redo all my background work. Next, there isn't a clear driver. I don't have to use it. Nobody's making me. Next, the people and organizations I work with haven't changed over yet. The software requirements and the costs of those are too great, or something else. You get to pick 2 of the biggest ones for you, or if you are using it, the 2 biggest ones that you hear from the people around you. All right. So the big winners are that other people haven't changed over, or I don't have to use it. Not knowing how being the next closest. So this is really interesting, right? So it seems like there's a bit of a peer pressure thing going on. They're not using it, so I'm not using it. No one's making me use it, so I'm not using it, so they're not using it. So it'll be really interesting to see how that changes after today. And then next question, this is open free form question. You get 1 word, so no sentence long answers, please. 1 word, what would make the most difference to improving the uptake of ARR 2016? In 1 word. And for those of you who are familiar with the word cloud idea, the answers that come up the most often become increase in size. So does this surprise anyone? I mean, is anybody surprised in terms of how many people are using it, or why they're not using it? Is this consistent with with what you would have expected? Did you come in not using it thinking, oh gosh, I'm going to be the only one? And the barriers, it's really interesting because I think in addition to training, there are some really interesting points in it that people are making, like the importance of champions and leadership. You know what I mean? So it is important to have people leading from the front and really pushing for this, really asking for it, and really showing that leadership within the industry. And so it'll be interesting to see from Stormwater Victoria's point of view, potentially, kind of what's their role, whose role is it to provide that leadership. Obviously, Engineers Australia has got a huge role in developing the tool. How are we actually going to get it out there and increase its popularity?